Today, I want to talk about the color black. This can be a very polarizing topic for oil painters, so much so that some teachers even advocate keeping black paint off your palette entirely. Now, I think this is a pretty extreme stance. I think that there's a lot of times when we can use black paint and when it's great, but in general, I do like to mix my own blacks. And in this video, I want to talk about why. I'll also demo some of my favorite go-to mixtures for black so that you can have luminous, interesting shadows in your paintings. But before I get into it, this video doesn't have any sponsors, and it's supported by people just like you through my Patreon. On Patreon, I share the videos early and ad-free, and I also have exclusive Patreon-only content. So if you like my videos and you want to learn more, be sure to check it out. Okay, now let's talk about black. Black is such an important color for oil painting, and oftentimes it's these dark, luminous shadows in old masters' paintings that make them feel so alive, that give them so much depth and so much interest, a sense of mystery. And I think that that is something that really draws a lot of people into oil painting. And it's a question I often get from students. How do I create these luminous, beautiful blacks? Can I use black out of the tube? Should I mix it with something? Should I only mix black from primary colors? What's the deal? And here's the thing. The old masters did use black, but they also used lots of layering and glazing to create the luminous blacks in their painting. And while you can still follow this method, it can take weeks, months, even years to create the luminous blacks like the old masters. So what can we do if we want to paint wet on wet alla prima and still have interesting blacks that have a lot of depth and nuance? This is where mixing your blacks comes into play. So rather than using black straight out of the tube, we can put together other colors from our palette, mix them up, and make nice, beautiful blacks that also have a lot of nuance. And not only that, but because we mix them from a few different colors, we can also make slight shifts to the black very easily that remain harmonious with the main black that we're using, but also give a lot of nuance into our shadow areas. By slightly shifting the temperature and the hues in our shadows, we can create really complex mixtures that give the painting a lot of interest, mystery, and complexity, even in a wet-on-wet alla prima painting. Let's go to a quick demo to show you what I mean. So we're going to do some comparisons of different blacks. Let's start with ivory black as our base. So this is just what a common black out of the tube is going to look like. So I'm just going to put some directly onto the paper here, and you can see it's a nice, deep, really dark black. It's fairly opaque, and the paint will usually tell you how opaque it is. So ivory black says it's opaque, and then we can kind of see what the undertone is on this black by giving a little scrape, and you can see, yeah, definitely it's really nice and opaque. I'm using Arches oil paper here, so we have a white ground underneath, and it covers it really, really nicely. So we have a nice solid black here, but it is a little flat. So let's start mixing some chromatic blacks instead and see how they differ. For our first chromatic black, we will be mixing an ultramarine blue with a burnt umber. So I'll just put a little bit of these on my palette. So I'm going to mix about equal parts of these colors. And let's see the mixture we get, if we can get a nice, more neutral black. This one is still leaning a little bit towards brown, so I'm going to get a bit more of the ultramarine blue. And now I have a nice, dark black mixture, as you can see. So let's put some of it down onto the paper. So comparing it next to the ivory black, it is a nice dark black. And then if we pull it across, we can see it is more transparent. So both the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber are somewhat transparent colors. So we're getting a little bit more transparency here, but also we're getting a little bit of notes of the brown and the blue in this black. It's hard to tell, but there are subtle changes in the pigment here, especially depending on how much you mix it. You'll get some slight variations that we can actually use as painters. This will become more clear when we get to the following mixtures. So this was just burnt umber and ultramarine blue, but let's see what happens when we mix a black from the 3 primary colors. So for this next black, we're going to use the 3 primary colors to do it. So I have French ultramarine or ultramarine blue, which is a transparent blue. I have cadmium red medium, which is an opaque red, and I also have cadmium yellow light, which is also an opaque yellow. So this is going to give us a more opaque black, but we'll have traces of all of these 3 colors in the black. So we'll get a little bit of the ultramarine blue. I'll take a little bit less of the red, so I have about that much red, and then just a small amount of the yellow, usually not too much yellow. Let's mix these together and see what we get. So this mixture is still leaning pretty brown, and so I'm going to add a bit more of the ultramarine to cool it down a bit, get it a little bit more neutral. I want to bring it closer to that ivory black that we have straight from the tube. So add even more of the blue. I think it's getting close to where I want it to be. I'm just going to add a little bit more of the blue to cool it down a bit. So now I've mixed a nice opaque black. We can take a look at how it goes onto the paper. So you can see compared to the others, we have a nice dark black. And then let's see what the undertone of this one is. So now as I move it across the paper and spread this thin layer, you can see that this one is leaning a lot towards blue. So this is a very cool black. But the nice thing about these chromatic blacks is that they have traces of all of the colors in them. And we can adjust them slightly by adding in some of the other colors. So for example, if I want to shift this black a little bit warmer, a little bit browner, then I can just add a bit more of the red and yellow to it. And if I add too much of the red and yellow, it really goes towards brown. So I'll just put a little bit more of the blue in. I just want to shift the temperature just a little bit. So now I have a very similar color to the previous black that I mixed, but this one is just a little bit warmer. So let's put that down. So you can see that in terms of value, they're both very dark. And then this one, as I bring it across the paper, we can see it has a slightly warmer undertone. So a bit more of that red and yellow coming through. It's also a little bit more opaque than the other one because it has less of that ultramarine blue in it and more of the opaque red and yellow. But you can see compared to these other ones, we have these more chromatic undertones that's giving some complexity to the black, and also being able to make these small shifts to the hue gives us a lot more flexibility in our paintings. Now for our third mixture, we'll still use the ultramarine blue, we'll still use the cadmium yellow light, but now we're going to use alizarin crimson. And this is a slightly transparent red, so this is going to give us a slightly different black mixture compared to using the cadmium red. So let's check it out. So as before, I'm going to get some ultramarine blue. I'll get a little bit of the cadmium yellow light. And then I'm going to get some of the alizarin crimson. Let's mix these together and see if we need to make any adjustments. So this is giving me a nice dark black. Maybe it's leaning a little bit green. Let's put it down next to the other blacks and see. So here you can see it's a nice dark black like the other ones. Let's see how it shows when we make it more transparent. So now that I'm scraping a thin layer on the paper, you can see that actually I thought it looked a little green on the palette, but it has this very purpley undertone that we're getting from the alizarin crimson. But you can see it's different from the undertone that we get with the cadmium red, cadmium yellow, and ultramarine blue combination. Here is slightly purpley, but it's a little bit more of a warmer purple, and that's from the warmth in the cadmium red. Versus this is a much cooler purple that we get from the alizarin crimson. But we can also make slight adjustments to the mixture to get slightly different undertones. Let's see what happens when we add a little bit of yellow. So now we still have a nice, really dark tone, but it's definitely greener. Let's pull it across. And yeah, you can see that this mixture, it still has some purple notes in it, but it also has some of the green tones too. So we're getting a little bit of a complex mixture of colors here. And this will go really nicely with this other mixture if we put them together in a painting, because we can have these small shifts. If we want to make it even cooler, we can add more blue to the mixture. And I'll just add that to the side over here. So here's the mixture with some blue in it. You can see it's nice and dark. But then as we bring it across the paper, now you can see it has that beautiful blue undertone to it. So when I'm working in a painting, I like to think about all of the different mixtures that I can get when I'm making these chromatic blacks, and I'll mix several different blacks, each shifted slightly different in terms of temperature and hue, and use all of these in the shadow areas to get these deep, complex shadows. I hope that was helpful and you got some ideas for your own work and how you can mix chromatic blacks to make these rich, nuanced shadows in your own paintings. If you have any questions or if you want to share your favorite black mixtures, feel free to post them in the comments below. Also, I want to say a big thank you to all my supporters on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for supporting this channel. I would not be able to keep making these videos without your support, so I really appreciate it. And if you're not already a member of my Patreon, then be sure to check it out because I post a lot of cool stuff over there, including real-time painting videos and Q&As and stuff like that. So I hope to see you there. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.